a remote and isolated landscape, defined by intense heat and pervasive silence, two individuals were reported missing. One of them was a 4-year-old boy named Gus Lamont. The other was a man known as Benjamin, who was reported missing a single day earlier, only a short distance away. These are not merely isolated incidents forgotten by the news cycle. They represent two separate families awaiting resolutions that have never arrived. For several weeks, organized search teams meticulously scanned the terrain of dirt, rock, and low brush. This immense effort involved hundreds of hours and numerous volunteers, yet it failed to yield a single conclusive trace. There were no verifiable footprints, no discarded pieces of clothing, no detectable scent trail, absolutely nothing. The environment offered only the wind and a growing list of questions. How does an adult man seemingly cease to exist, and then less than 1 day later, a young child is reported missing in nearly the identical location? On September 26th, a calm Tuesday enveloped the South Australian Outback. During that afternoon, motorists reported observing a blue Hyundai hatchback being operated in an unusual manner on the highway. That specific automobile was registered to Benjamin, who was undertaking his journey alone. While no formal indication of distress was documented, certain aspects of his travel patterns that day would later become significant to the investigation. The following morning, on September 27th, 4-year-old Gus Lamont was last visually confirmed at his family's rural station, a secluded property near Unta. He had been engaged in play in close proximity to the main homestead. His family members became aware he was missing and conducted an initial inspection. The local police were formally notified, and within a few hours, various emergency service units began arriving at the location. A coordinated effort materialized, involving 4-wheel drive vehicles, helicopters, and numerous local volunteers. What remained unknown to most participants at that time was that Benjamin's vehicle had been located in an abandoned state not far from where rescue personnel were assembling to look for Gus. The car was unoccupied, its doors were secured, and his personal belongings were not present inside. Investigators could not confirm any identifiable tracks leading away from the automobile. These were two independent search missions for two separate individuals, yet they shared a single geographical map. Over the subsequent days, the airspace above the Unta area was consistently occupied by aircraft. Helicopters maintained a low altitude, while police command coordinated the movements of ground teams. By the conclusion of that week, the chronological sequences of the two missing person cases had completely converged. Benjamin was last seen on the 26th, Gus was reported missing on the 27th, and by the 28th, their names were being mentioned together in official police briefings. The South Australian Outback is an environment that does not readily accommodate human error. When the organized search for Gus Lamont commenced, emergency service providers were acutely aware that the statistical probabilities were not favorable. The property itself was accessible only by rough tracks and long expanses of uninhabited land. At its maximum extent, the designated search zone covered nearly 470 square kilometers. Helicopters circled overhead, methodically mapping the ground, while trained trackers pursued faint soil impressions. However, the landscape possessed its own method of concealing evidence, as wind currents rearranged the surface layer of sand almost hourly. Even the most encouraging lead was later categorized as inconclusive. As the days progressed, the primary search area was gradually reduced to a more focused core section, which was then repeatedly scrutinized. They utilized thermal imaging drones and canines trained to detect human scent, yet the official reports consistently stated that nothing of evidentiary value had been located. The extensive ground search continued for approximately 2 weeks, involving hundreds of people, but the Outback remained uncommunicative. When the initial rescue teams mobilized to locate Gus, they were the identical units that encountered Benjamin's vehicle. This was a coincidence so pronounced that it gave pause to even the most experienced investigators. However, the official police position stated that no confirmed connection existed between the two incidents, although both investigations were being actively cross-referenced. In digital forums, speculative theories began to proliferate rapidly. No verified sightings of Benjamin have emerged since that period. As days progressed and the active search for Gus continued, certain questions began to emerge publicly. One of the initial points of public concern involved the delayed release of an official photograph of Gus. For nearly 5 days following his disappearance, the general public had not seen his likeness. Subsequently, another detail emerged indicating that Gus's father, Joshua, had not been informed about his son's disappearance immediately. Then there was the issue of access to the property itself, as volunteers from surrounding communities were explicitly asked not to come to the area. The family formally requested that no additional persons enter the land. The police respected this request, but to those outside the situation, it seemed unusual. When investigative teams conducted a closer examination of the case, they began with information that could be derived from the land and available technology. Mobile phone records, vehicle GPS data, and nearby cell tower interactions were all reviewed. Consequently, when police attempted to trace the digital footprints, the obtained results were fragmentary. Forensic specialists meticulously examined the property for any physical evidence, but nothing suggested a forced entry or any form of struggle. After the initial sweep yielded no results, investigators broadened their analysis, comparing the early management of this case to other prominent Australian missing person investigations. As weeks transformed into months, the story of Gus Lamont's disappearance gradually transitioned from daily headline news to quieter side columns. Concurrently, many observers noted a discernible difference in how investigative resources are allocated. When a high-profile case captures national focus, resources are frequently directed in abundance. However, in cases like Gus's, which are isolated by both geography and specific circumstances, sustained public attention often fades more rapidly. The Outback does not easily foster widespread public empathy. For law enforcement agencies, the burden of public expectation is tremendous. When individuals speak about Gus Lamont, they do not begin with the details of the official investigation. They talk about the quality of his laughter and how he adored his small yellow Minions-themed shirt. These are the specific memories his family actively holds on to. For his family, each new sunrise on that vast, empty property serves as another poignant reminder of what is now absent. For Benjamin's loved ones, an identical silence profoundly resonates as well. These are two separate households, two families enduring a weight, connected by a form of emotional pain that language can never fully articulate. The broader community continues to feel the emotional weight of these events. In small towns scattered throughout the Outback, a palpable sense of unease persists. However, beyond the immediate sorrow exists a more profound lesson regarding isolation. It stands as a significant reminder that these narratives do not belong exclusively to news headlines. As we remember both Gus and Benjamin, we are reminded of a simple yet powerful concept, that every human life inherently deserves to be seen, to be searched for, and to be remembered. Because somewhere within the immense expanse of the Australian Outback, two names remain associated with unanswered questions.